Blitz puts up a three. And
goal! Bearcat Blitz coming at you on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer. And we had 3 commits last week for UC football and another 3 commits to talk about this week in the class of 2025 for UC football, as we get a high 3-star, low 4-star talent in the fold, depending on what service you look at. And Jamari DeLoach, Terrell Holcomb, 3-star athlete, commits to Cincinnati. He's kind of a hybrid linebacker safety, and Cincinnati gets a potential diamond in the rough at offensive tackle, Jahari Medlock, who is not yet ranked on a service, but we all know how those tackles can be. It's very difficult to find the elite talents there. Those are talents that are easy to identify early on. It takes a little bit of moving and shaking and just faith and hope with some of these guys that you're hoping can develop into major tackle prospects. It's hard to find those guys at the low 3-star and unranked levels, but Cincinnati thinks they've found one in Medlock. We discuss all that on this episode. Excited to bring it to you across the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman, as mentioned, and Neil Meyer joining me both from BearcatsTalk.com, and you can catch Bearcat Blitz on Talking Cats with Russ Heltman, the YouTube page. We have all of the shows visually and audio mediums available there, and you can catch us on podcasts, wherever podcast platform you frequent, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Google, all those good spots. And I think we'll be back on Valley Sports Ohio in the fall once the football season gets a little bit closer. Got that to get to, Neil. Plus, we have a debut for the Cincinnati Bearcats men's basketball 24-25 season. A reported date for that. We'll get to a team that they are just used to destroying. That's coming to town for that outfit in early November. And we will also kind of touch on all the commits this week and maybe get a full look at where Cincinnati sits as of this current recording in the recruiting team rankings for 2025. All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz after a message from Bet Online and our great sponsors. The NBA Finals is all wrapped up, but Bet Online is still your number one source for sports betting needs every season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Still have the NHL Finals going on with Edmonton trying to crawl out of a 3-0 hole. They got the 8-1 win a couple nights ago, and they're trying to get the job done once again. I think they have to go on the road, though, back to Florida for this latest matchup. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on that first deposit. Once again, that's promo code BLEAV, the name of our service. Bet Online, the game starts here. Let's get a quick message from our great sponsors and then get into this show on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Neil, a big 2-week stretch for the Cincinnati Bearcats football program, as they have added nearly half of their total commitments in the 2025 class over the past 7 to 10 days. We got another trio of commits, starting with the kind of in order of when they came in. We had Jahari Medlock, the unranked offensive tackle, who is committing to Cincinnati over just a couple days ago. And then you had Terrell Holcomb, comes in, 3-star athlete, 167th ranked athlete nationally on 24/7 Sports, 85th best player in Ohio, kind of a bigger safety linebacker hybrid. And then you get a guy that profiles as the exact type of player Cincinnati can realistically capture and realistically build its foundation in the Scott Satterfield era with, and that is Jamari DeLoach, which will kind of focus the conversation around DeLoach. He is their 15th commitment of the 2025 class, committed on Monday night, ranked 614th overall in the 2025 class. And Neil, probably their best talent right there neck and neck with Mikael Skinner right now. You got a wide receiver on one side, you got a cornerback on the other side, a composite 4-star player, Jamari DeLoach, is on 24/7 Sports, and a big addition. 28th best cornerback on their database, 8th best player in Virginia, and nationally, he is the 612th best player overall, 56th ranked player on their composite feed, and 20th best player in Virginia. Neil, they beat out the likes of Michigan, some other big names that were vying for Jamari DeLoach's services. And this is a big feather in the cap of this recruiting staff to kind of signal to the rest of the 2025 class, and especially that 2026 class, that the recruiting ranks are elevating, the facilities are elevating, starting with that thing opening up, scheduled to be opened up for practices this fall. Big 12 feel is what a player like Jamari DeLoach brings. And you're starting to see not only the top 6 schools, the top schools getting included with these 4-star players, but these middle tier, kind of lower end 4-star, high 3-star players are committing to Cincinnati and making it official.
Yeah, absolutely. And Russ, as you mentioned, Jamari DeLoach is a big time commit. And the reason why being that is you look at what he's able to do on tape, Russ. I mean, he's ranked the 28th cornerback in the class of 2025 per 247 Sports, 612th player nationally, was on campus for his official visit over the weekend. But Russ, this is a guy who fits the prime mold of what Kerry Combs and this defensive secondary are looking to do. And I actually had the chance to sit down with Jamari and discuss his decision to come to Cincinnati, where he said the biggest thing that really played a factor into him about Cincinnati was the culture that Scott Satterfield and the staff and the culture surrounding the Cincinnati football program and the way they compete. I love the program and how the school helps their athletes. The coaching staff really excites me as well. But he said the biggest thing for him that really stood out when he took his visit was hearing all the benefits that come with the business degree at the University of Cincinnati. They're in the Lindner College of Business. So it seems like that's going to be the route that DeLoach will be taking to study when he comes to the University of Cincinnati. But Russ, we got to talk about it. Kerry Combs. This is a big time addition for Kerry Combs. Obviously, Kerry Combs has the resume. You've seen the talent and what he's been able to put into the NFL. But to land a guy like DeLoach, he broke down the decision and his relationship with Kerry Combs to myself late last night. And he said to come to Cincinnati and get the opportunity to work alongside one of the best in Coach Combs, it was an easy decision. I'm more than excited to work with him, and I know he'll develop me into the great. Seeing his resume and the caliber of players he has helped get to the league and the careers that the defensive backs have had in the NFL, it says a lot about Coach Combs. And he said, I weighed all the options, the pros and the cons, and what helped me make the final decision was whose wing do I want to be under throughout my college career. And of course, I elected to be under the best defensive back coach in the country. What does that say, Russ? I mean, the resume states itself for Kerry Combs, but man, that's the big time commit right there for Jamari DeLoach. But Russ, another big one that I'm pretty excited for is Jahari Medlock, 6'7", 290 pounds, a wrestler, offensive lineman prospect, but really excited for him, Russ, because there's reasons why. Because obviously, look at the job that Coach Cardwell has done. Aiden Pastoria, Ethan Green. They had Zach Clark they flipped from last offseason as well. They are targeting big, talented, physical, big body framed offensive linemen. And Russ, looking at the offers for Jahari Medlock, you don't see many that stick off the page outside of a Maryland, a Georgia Tech, a Kansas State. But Russ,
Diamond in the rough.
Diamond in the rough, and
that's what they're projecting him to be, at least.
Yeah, and he has all the intangibles to where if things pan out for him, he could come in here and be an immediate impact on that offensive line, potentially as a true freshman. If things work out and he has a big senior season, look at what he's able to do, because Russ, you and I have talked about it. Offensive lines, all seniors, all the way across the board. There's going to be a lot of open spots come for these younger guys following the 2024 season. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. And then you bring in another guy like Terrell Holcomb, a 3-star athlete who's played multiple positions on the defensive side of the ball. But Russ, I think when we're talking about this recruiting class, we have to note that 5 of the 15 commits right now are from the state of Ohio. And Scott Satterfield and the staff mentioned that they were really going to hit home here in Ohio and really recruit the state of Ohio very well. I believe 5 of the 15 are already right now, and I'm pretty sure there's more to come from the state of Ohio here in the 2025 class.
Right. And when you look at Indiana as well, you got an Indiana name mixed in there as well. 6 players from Ohio and Indiana. That 300-mile radius, Neil. What did we talk about 2 weeks ago when the first bevy of recruits came in? Being able to pick and maybe nail a couple guys here and there that are in the hotbeds of talent athletically in the southeast and then the far west, but making the 300-mile radius your number one kind of stanchion, your number one kind of totem to wrap your entire classes around. That's exactly what they're doing with 33% of those guys, 6 of the 15 being from Indiana, Ohio, and 5 being Ohio guys at that. Big stretch for the Cincinnati football program, and kind of looking at what Deloach brings to the table. Just physical, Neil. I didn't see a ton of ball skills on my watch through his clips. It's just maybe there just aren't a ton of picks for him to showcase, but sticky defender, sticky coverage man, does a great job with his keys. Like the tackling is on point. Rap tackler, does a great job in the open field, made multiple one-on-one tackles on his film. And I think the ball skills, you could kind of teach that a little bit throughout your college years. You can't teach the physicality, you can't teach the mentality, and you can't teach the tackling. On top of that, Neil, he showed some chops as a return man as well. So Deloach can bring a physical skill set to this team. As a little undersized at 5'9", 165 pounds. We'll see how much height he
worth noting
adds
too,
on, but
worth noting the speed when you watch the film. The speed,
yeah.
He is an all-state track runner.
All-state track guy.
And potentially a guy that could be a multi-sport athlete here at the University of Cincinnati. He did say that is a potential possibility throughout.
I hope he does. I love guys do that.
Pursues in the college realms. But Russ, you turn on the tape and you talk about it, open field tackling, very, very high IQ player. But the biggest thing that jumps off the tape is the speed, Russ. The speed is the biggest factor. And once you have
especially the closing speed on those long balls, that he isn't even like the main defender on the ball, but he sees the ball in the air and he can close a gap 20, 30 yards in 2-3 seconds. It's crazy. And
we saw that this spring, Russ, a prime example, Dakari Anderson and Cale Woodburn on the offensive side of the ball this spring. We saw that speed this past spring camp, but now you add a guy on the defensive side of the ball with that kind of speed. It's pretty exciting times.
And what was the biggest hindrance for this secondary last year? Explosive plays, lack of athleticism, lack of top-end speed to be able to close the door and make some of those 20, 30-plus completions, incompletions that they were for most other teams in the Big 12, not for Cincinnati. They are recognizing the issues that befell them in the first year, and they're doing, I would say, a solid job thus far of addressing those issues, whether it be this coming season in the transfer portal with guys like Derek Canteen and more that they got from the secondary, and a guy right here in Jamari Deloach, another player that Virginia Tech wanted to keep, just like Derek Canteen. Virginia Tech not necessarily keep him, wanted to add him, get his commitment on the board. The Hokies were beat out. The Wolverines were beat out by the Bearcats. They pull off the upset in this recruitment game, and they get Jamari Deloach in the fold. We'll touch on Holcomb and Medlock a little bit more after this break and get to the season opening opponent for Wes Miller's crew and their 24-25 slate right here on Bearcat Blitz. Cincinnati adds 3 commitments this week, heading into our first show of the week. Perfect timing. I thought about maybe recording on Monday. I am so glad I didn't, because we would have missed all of those commits except for
them.
And we have, of course, Mikkel Skinner is the number 1 player on the board right now, just going through the top 5 ranked commits in Cincinnati's class. Jamari Deloach at number 2. They're kind of tied, though. They're both ranked 90 overall as 4-star talents. 87 ranking for Zion Johnson, the running back. 87 ranking for Patrick Williams, the cornerback. And an 87 ranking for CJ Crete. Those are strong numbers so far in that top 5. And then getting to the names that we didn't kind of focus on as much, although Neil with some high praise for Jahari Medlock, who will start with your unranked as of right now. Neil, 6'6", 278 pounds, committed to Cincinnati after a official, I don't know if it's an official visit, but it was a visit a couple weeks ago towards the end of May. As that frame you were talking about, 6'6", 278 pounds, I'd imagine the Nico Palzelli and co are going to get him closer to 305, 315 for his playing weight once he gets fully ready to roll out there on the Nippert Stadium gridiron. But Georgia State, Georgia Tech, Kansas State, Liberty, Maryland, Tulane, Western Kentucky, Coastal Carolina. Neil, these are the schools that kind of search for those diamonds. They search for those guys early on and try to nab them. Cincinnati, I think, smartly playing in those waters at the offensive tackle spot, because it's just to get those guys, Neil, that are going to be like you mentioned, maybe Medlock could be day one starters or at least 3-year starters, all conference type of talents in the Big 12. They're easy to identify early on in high school, and they're most often is coming with a high 4-star to 5-star ranking because of how valuable that position is to the sport of football and how few of those top end talents there are out there. This is one of those kind of throw a dart at the board and see if you can hit some gold with Jahari Medlock, who has a frame and potentially the traits and the tangibles to be that diamond in the rough they're looking for him to be.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And it's a great thing you mentioned that, because you look at the intangibles, as we discussed earlier, 6'6", close to 290. It would be safe to assume they would try to get him up to that 305 to 310 range. But anytime, Russ, you see it, they were able to land guys there on the offensive line. And that's where a lot of coaches within the recruiting industry really look at. They don't look at these 5 stars. Obviously, they look at the 5 stars, but they're targeting these lower end guys because they know that they can develop them and get the right tools, the right intangibles. But this staff has done a great job, Russ, at really targeting that offensive line. I think offensive line coach Nick Cardwell is doing a fantastic job. But for anybody who's been around the program can understand why people would want to play for a guy like Nick Cardwell there on the offensive line. But Russ, as you mentioned, looking at this recruiting class, obviously Mikhail Skinner and Jamari Deloach are up at the top of the class, but you look down as well, Jahari Medlock, he had offers from some very good programs. Georgia State is a good program down there in their conference. Coastal Carolina, Kansas State, Maryland's even one of those. Tulane. They're one of those schools where they like to get ahead of the process and really find those quote-unquote diamond in the rough kind of players. And that is the definition of what Jahari Medlock is. And then you look down as well throughout this class. You have another quick speedster in Colin Wilson. We talked about him a couple of months ago. Kamari Smith out of Wayne in Dayton, a 6'5", 200-pound tight end. Jermaine Jones out of Illinois, the defensive back. And then you have Terrell Holcomb. But this offensive line, Russ, I mean, you're looking at the commits here in the offensive line. Samuel Page, 6'6", 295. Then you come in and you bring in a guy like Jahari Medlock. The two offensive line that they have addressed here in the recruiting class, Russ, both stand 6'6", 6'7". So overall, that kind of shows the caliber player that they are targeting there on the offensive line.
And some more big fellas needed. That's kind of what I imagine the main focus is going to be the rest of the way here. When you look at the fact that they have 3 offensive and defensive linemen out of the 15 commits in this class, need to beef that up. I would say probably have to double that number, get about 6 total defensive and offensive linemen, maybe 7 to feel really confident, because it's a simple game, football. Sometimes the big fellas, the better they are, the more you're going to win. And the more you can dominate the trenches, the easier it's going to be, especially in this league where you're not going to have to deal with massive skill player talent all across the board from a lot of different schools. You're not going to have to deal with a queen on the chessboard type of quarterback most often from a lot of these schools. There just isn't that one out there besides Colorado's Shadur Sanders. And outside of that, we know what's kind of issues Colorado's had with their talent accumulation. So if you could find a way to be the most disciplined and the strongest, angriest, nastiest team inside the trenches on both sides of the ball, you're going to have a lot of success and a lot of consistent success in this league. And that's what I imagine with this run-heavy offense and the way that they're going to be built this year with that defensive line headed up by Dante Corleone. That's how they're trying to win under Scott Satterfield. Team trying to win under Wes Miller, trying to get their first one, and they probably won't have much issue doing it, Neil, when the Bearcats welcome in Arkansas Pine Bluff on November 4th. According to Made for March, Cincinnati is playing Pine Bluff on November 4th to start their 2024-25 season. It's going to be a bye game with a $110,000 guarantee for Arkansas Pine Bluff. Neil, they've won I think they are definitively undefeated against Pine Bluff, and according to Sport Reference, over the past 5 games, they have won by an average of 42.2 points. So going to be a nice, I think, 3-game onboarding for Cincinnati. Arkansas Pine Bluff, November 4th, Morehead State, November 8th, and then November 13th at Northern Kentucky before a trip to face Villanova on December 3rd. Obviously, there's going to be games mixed in before that. They're going to have some stuff slotted in there, but that's a pretty good and, I think, simple, calming way to start the 24-25 season, a season that's going to have the highest expectations for this program probably in the past 15 years. You could imagine, like, that's kind of what it's laid out right now with the amount of talent that they have brought in, and Arkansas Pine Bluff looks to be the first victim.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ, and it's worth noting that game will be on my 25th birthday, so hopefully it starts with a W.
Everybody
there.
bring your confetti poppers for Neil, and we'll pop it at halftime.
At halftime, yep. But overall, Russ, we've talked about it all off season long about what this non-conference schedule would look like. I think it was safe to say that we knew a buy-in game was going to be coming, and the rest they were going to file out these non-conference.
There's going to be a few more buy games coming too.
Yeah, that they were going to fill these last few with the buy-in games. Arkansas Pine Bluff is one. Russ, as you mentioned, it's a $110,000 guarantee for Arkansas Pine Bluff, but this is a good opportunity there to where they can see what they have, but can't really trust the history data, obviously, knowing that they're definitively undefeated versus Arkansas Pine Bluff in the future. But you never know in the college basketball. But it's safe to say this is a great opener for Wes Miller and the staff. I mean, it's an opportunity to really see what this roster and what this lineups will be considering looking through on paper and then on the court. Because, Russ, I'm not sure if you saw the post yesterday from the social media team, but it did post a couple pictures of Day Thomas going through warm-ups and practices, which is something Wes Miller noted in his press conference, that he was getting back to full health and capacity there as summer workouts are underway. So that's
right on time.
That's a positive update as well as we talk about the basketball program. But overall, Russ, as you mentioned, Arkansas Pine Bluff, Northern Kentucky, and Morehead State should be 3-0 heading into that game versus Villanova, to say the least.
Yeah, as of right now, those are the only 3 games. I might be missing one maybe, but as of right now, those are the only 3 games that have been slated before the December 3rd affair against Villanova. And I imagine there aren't a ton of games after December 3rd dates that have to be scheduled, so a large majority of the rest of the non-con will be booked in the middle and end of November. Will they play in a multi-team event? That's probably what we have coming up next, Neil. We would have seen them probably. They would have definitely gotten into a holiday tournament and announced that by now. It's a little bit too late in the game to do that from my view, but I think we'll see some kind of multi-team event like we saw last year, and wait that news as well. That'll do it though on this episode of Bearcat Blitz. 3 more commits in the fold for Cincinnati, who sits at number 32 nationally on the 24/7 Sports overall team rankings, kind of hovering in that spot overall. 24/7 Sports a little bit higher than other major ranking outlets. Cincinnati kind of consensus in the back end of the top 30 or the back end of the top 40 nationally right now. And with the way they're recruiting, I would imagine they'll stick kind of in that back end once things are all said and done of that top 40, if not just inside the top 45. For the second recruiting class under Scott Satterfield. Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online, right here on the Believe Network.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3. Yes!